There are two people who have made more money than anyone else in the world. Warren Buffett and his lifelong business partner, Charlie Munger. These two said that while making tens of billions, they looked at only one principle their whole lives. It's not difficult financial statements or complex charts. When, why, and where do people move? But this principle was already written in its entirety in a story from 3,000 years ago. There was a man who didn't know this. He reached the point where his goal of 10 years was in plain sight, but he lost everything while he took a nap. You will succeed because you wanted it. Hello, this is Hawaii Dad. Everyone, in the video 2 weeks ago, we saw how the world's genius, Newton, was bewitched by a song and lost his entire fortune of 6 billion won. Today is the second part of that story. We are going along with Odyssey on the Shifting Human. On the day the first part aired, the book climbed to the top of the real-time charts at Kyobo Book Center. So today I want to deliver the insights of this book to you from a completely different perspective. And last week, the controversial director's Odyssey was finally released in our country. 200,000 tickets were reserved even before the release. It's the biggest movie this summer, surpassing Oppenheimer. The movie shows a 3,000-year-old monster over 3 hours. But this book will show you that those monsters are still alive in my company, my investments, and my account today. Once I show you one scene from 3,000 years ago, it leads straight to Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, and even into the boardroom of Buffett and Munger's Berkshire Hathaway. Half of it is an ancient story, but the other half is our story, which is chillingly relevant. So it doesn't matter if you don't know anything about Greek mythology. When today's story is over, you will understand with a powerful realization why your coworker acts that way, why tens of thousands of people flock to that stock, and most importantly, what you should do here. He endured for 10 years and lost everything in a few hours. The book's protagonist, Odysseus, he is the man who went through hell for 10 years on the famous Trojan battlefield. The sea voyage home after the war was supposed to take only a month. But this man takes 10 years to return from a 1-month journey. Why did those 10 years even begin? We start from here today. One day, while sailing home, he arrives at the island of the god who controls the winds. This god treats his party exceptionally well for an entire month. And on the day they leave, he hands them a heavy bag made of bull's skin. Inside this bag, all the headwinds of the world were trapped. They tied the opening tightly with a silver string, so not even a breath of wind could escape. The only wind left outside the sack, not contained within, was the gentle tailwind that would lead them straight home. If they just guarded this sack, their 10 years of wandering would come to an end. Odysseus tied the sack securely under the deck and took the ship's helm himself, trusting no one else. And for nearly 10 days and nights he held onto that helm, without even a wink of sleep. Whenever sleep washed over him, he would recall the faces of his wife and child. Finally, on the morning of the 10th day, the land they had longed for rose above the horizon. It was his homeland, Ithaca. It was close enough that they could clearly see the smoke from the bonfires on the shore. The moment relief washed over him that it was finally over, the tension he had held for 10 days snapped, and he hit his limit. Not realizing it, he fell into a sleep as deep as a faint. Deep sleep swallowed him whole as he lay there. Now as the captain slept, that sack, which no one paid much attention to, kept catching the crew's eyes. Soon all their gazes were fixed upon that same sack. And the crew, too, recalled the past 10 years all at once. We fought for 10 years just the same, and risked our lives every day away from our families. But what do we have in our hands now? They were empty. They could picture themselves crossing the threshold of their homes empty-handed. The spoils were always the captain's share, and this time he kept the sack to himself without ever showing them what was inside. Yes, everyone, this is the critical point. It wasn't anything else. The very fact that he didn't show them became the seed of suspicion. Finally, one crew member speaks up. Everything inside that must be gold and silver. Our share, which we haven't received for 10 years, must all be in there. The person next to him nods, and the nod spreads to the next and the next. Let's check it at least before the captain wakes up. It's now or never. If not now, we'll never see it. And they begin to untie the tightly bound silver string, one strand at a time. The moment they did, all the adverse winds of the world trapped in the sack burst out at once. What the captain, who had held on for 10 days, faced when he jolted awake was not the homeland right in front of them, but a massive storm dragging the ship back out into the open sea. At this part, Homer wrote down Odysseus's innermost feelings without holding back. Should I just throw myself into the sea? It is said that beside him his men wept aloud. It was a cry born from realizing where the single thread they had untied was dragging them. Yes, hearing this far, most people have this thought. How could they doubt their leader, whom they followed for not just a year or two, but 10? Foolish men. But the author of this book flips the question here. Are the subordinates truly the foolish ones in this scene? The only person on that ship who knew the bag contained wind, not gold, was Odysseus. Then what he should have done is simple. On the day he received the bag, he only needed to say one thing to his men. Listen, what's inside is neither gold nor silver. It is the wind that will carry us home. If opened, we will be dragged back out to the deep sea, so no one must touch it. With just these words, there would have been no room for doubt to grow. But he never said that one thing. The clever mind that opened the impenetrable gates of the enemy with the Trojan horse trick never once bothered to consider the hearts of the men who stood by him for 10 years. Then what about the subordinates? They didn't open the bag because they were weak-willed. It wasn't because they were foolish either. These 2 lines in the book are the highlight of this chapter. It is not because someone is inadequate that something suddenly arises in their heart when they see this difference. It is because they are human. The book even points out that the order was reversed. No one had ever seen inside the bag but the desire to receive something filled a bag they had never seen with gold and silver. People move toward where their own share is at stake. Yes, everyone. So this is today's first key point. People move toward where their own share is at stake. When we don't understand why someone acts a certain way, we usually try to guess their heart. But what this 3,000-year-old story teaches us is much simpler. It's telling us to look not at their heart, but at where their share is hanging. The desire to secure one's share doesn't just drive actions. It distorts judgment in advance. It means it's hard to distinguish whether my conclusion is a calm judgment or one predetermined by my share. The book moves from this point to Alexander the Great in the desert. Just before his army collapses from thirst, he pours the helmet full of water brought by scouts onto the ground in front of everyone. I cannot drink this alone. The leader who always took the good for himself lost his way home, while the king, who poured out a helmet of water, gained the world. And the person who summarized this truth in one sentence is Charlie Munger from the intro. Show me the incentive, and I will show you the outcome. Incentive, if translated into Korean, is the share that is at stake for me. Munger even left behind this confession. I have always prided myself on knowing that power better than anyone. And yet I have underestimated that power my entire life. Every single year I am surprised all over again. My employees, my clients, and the tens of thousands flooding the market are all moving toward their own interests right now. If you warn them in advance, people simply don't believe you. However, you might be thinking this right now. If people moving toward their own interests is such an obvious principle, couldn't someone just warn them beforehand? That warning did exist, and a bone-chillingly accurate warning at that on that beach 3 years ago. The beginning of this whole story? Let's go back to the last night of Troy. After 10 years of failed sieges, the enemy suddenly vanished from before the walls of Troy. Seeing the giant wooden horse left on the beach, the Trojans rejoiced, calling it a parting gift. Then, one person stepped before the excited crowd, Cassandra, the princess of this land. The god of prophecy had confessed his love and granted her the power to see the future. But when she rejected him, the god placed a curse upon that gift. From then on, no one would ever believe a word you say. Yeah. So, she lived a life where she could see the entire future, but not a single person believed her. The princess shouted exactly what she saw on the beach. Tonight, sometime after midnight, a small door will open in the side of the wooden horse. Hidden soldiers will rappel down and immediately unbar the city gates. The crowd looked at her, but there was one thing missing from their eyes: belief. That very day, the wooden horse was dragged into Troy. It stopped 4 times while passing the gates, and each time you could hear the clashing of weapons from within its belly. Even after hearing those sounds, the people could not stop, because a solidified conviction makes it impossible to change course even when faced with evidence. And that night, sometime after midnight, just as the princess said, a small door opened in the side of the horse. Just as she saw, the gates opened. Just as she saw, the fleet arrived. And just as she saw, Troy fell that night. Cassandra was never wrong, not even once. Yet that fact did not save her. Falsehood arrives sounding pleasant, while truth arrives sounding uncomfortable. That day on the beach, the same people heard 2 kinds of words simultaneously. That's right. On one side, the words that the Greek army had left and they were now safe. And on the other, the cry that the enemy is inside, and that the city will fall tonight. Was it because the Trojans were particularly foolish? The diagnosis in the book remains the same for the 3rd year. Lies arrive fashioned into the shape we want to hear. They stamp their approval on our decisions and take our side. Conversely, the truth points exactly to the parts we ignored and makes us re-examine the decisions we've already made. That is why the truth always arrives with an uncomfortable face. And I found these 2 lines to be truly impressive. The right words make us do something. However, a lie demands nothing. It just lets us keep going the way we were heading. It's not that we were being deceived, we were choosing the easier path ourselves. The legendary CEO of Intel, Andy Grove, also wrote this in his book. When a company falters, the person who notices the crisis last is, surprisingly, the CEO. Because while the crisis signals spotted by employees move upward, they get polished to sound better at every step. And in 2026, there is one person standing in the place of Princess Cassandra right now: Warren Buffett. Starting a few years ago, he began selling stocks and buying cash. That cash amounted to a staggering $397 billion. In our currency, about 580 trillion won, the largest ever in history. What was people's reaction during that time? Buffett is past his prime now. He doesn't understand today's market, so he has no choice but to act like that. But such reactions are not the first time. In 1999, when he insisted until the end that he wouldn't buy IT stocks, a famous economic magazine put this in big letters on its cover: Warren, what's your problem? But everyone, the truly scary question is this: why can people trust the warning of someone who has never been wrong? The answer was in the first point I mentioned earlier. It's because their own stake is already tied to the side they want to believe in. To someone who has already bought stocks, Buffett's warning isn't a warning. It becomes an unpleasant sound saying your account is wrong. So I take it upon myself to erase the warning. Even this act of erasing the warning. We move according to our incentives. But even then, a small voice must have been heard from within us. You surely must have heard it. This path, this doesn't feel right. You heard it, but you buried it. Because the news about the neighbor making a fortune always sounds louder. A true Cassandra is not someone who sees the future. She is the one who saw the most immediate truth first. People don't lose because they don't know. They lose because they know but make reckless moves. Yes. However, there are cases where people collapse even after hearing the warning clearly with both ears. This is the final story for today. It is the story of an island that Odysseus and his crew arrived at one day. On this island lived a herd of cattle cherished by the gods. They had already received the same warning twice without a single word changed. If you don't touch those cattle, you will return home, but the moment you do, you'll lose both your ship and your crew. The subordinates even swear to the heavens that they will never lay a hand on them. But, as luck would have it, contrary winds keep the ship trapped on the island for a month, and the grain they brought runs out. Now there is something important here. These men were not on the verge of collapsing from starvation. They were catching fish and birds, so even if they weren't full, they were getting by. Then one day, while their leader was away for a moment, yes, again while the captain was absent, one subordinate speaks up like this: "There is nothing more miserable in this world than dying of hunger. Let's just kill those cattle and build a shrine later to make amends." Everyone nodded, and eventually they slaughtered the cattle and feasted for 6 days. And on the 7th morning, the wind that had held them captive dies down as if by a miracle. It was just 6 days. If they had held out for just 6 more days, they all would have survived and stepped onto their homeland. As soon as they sailed out, a lightning bolt shattered the ship, and just as warned, only Odysseus survived by clinging to a broken plank. This is the line I underlined in the book at this scene. What truly destroyed them was not an unavoidable starvation, but the foolishness of not stopping where they should have stopped. Their dead end did not arrive suddenly one day. It was a dead end they reached after walking toward it step by step on their own. Only humans make moves that even animals wouldn't, and then regret them. Everyone, even a starving polar bear. It is said that they only risk their lives to hunt when there is truly no other way. But people make reckless moves, even when there are perfectly good alternatives right beside them. What is the difference between a winning move and a reckless move? The book illustrates this difference with 2 generals we are recently familiar with. General Han Xin of the Han Dynasty used the fighting with one's back to the river tactic, which is considered a taboo in military strategy. But his army was small and cut off from supplies, so he had no other options. The soldiers, with nowhere to retreat, fought desperately and defeated an enemy, many times their size. More than 1,000 years later, General Sin Rip during the Imjin War. Ahead of him was a natural mountain pass where the enemy would have to climb up in a single file if he just blocked it. Sin Rip abandoned that pass and insisted on leading his troops to the plains, turning his back to the river. He was clumsily imitating Han Xin's famous strategy. Han Xin had no other choice, but for Sin Rip, a better option was clearly available. They both had their backs to the river, but for one it became a historic winning move, and for the other, a tragedy. What separated the two was not the size of their courage, but this very question: is there really another perfectly fine path right now? And if we quietly reflect on the moments we make a desperate move, strangely, it's always when we are extremely desperate, right? It has to work this time. I can't miss out here. The stronger that desperation, the more other paths disappear from view. Even if they exist, you can't see them. So that's not because you're incompetent, but a sign of how earnestly you've been living your life. Then what is the opposite of a desperate move? Is it gritting your teeth and enduring? This book offers a different take. The truly strong person is not the one who bluffs and risks everything in the face of a crisis. They are the ones who silently cultivate their ground long before a desperate situation arrives, so they don't have to make such moves. They set aside grain. When the harvest is good, learn to fish. When they are free, and quietly fill their storehouse. When they can, stockpile. What those subordinates lacked wasn't courage, but a storehouse to last them 6 days. What happened to Odysseus, who survived alone? He washed up on a remote island pushed by the wave. The owner of that island takes a liking to him at first sight. It was the beautiful goddess Calypso. The island from which the goddess wouldn't let him leave was a paradise lacking nothing. But every day, at dawn, this man would unfailingly go out to the seaside rocks and stare endlessly at the horizon where his home lay. He sat by the sea, weeping and returning not just for a day or two, but for 7 years. In the 7th year, Calypso, ordered by the gods to let him go, makes one final offer, Stay here with me. Then I will make you immortal, never to grow old. With just one nod, it was an offer to be freed forever from the inevitable end of human life. I recently transcribed Odysseus' answer like this. Goddess, I know everything. My wife is not as beautiful as you. I am not unaware of that. Nevertheless, I want to go home. That is the only thought on my mind, day and night. Yes, he turned down an immortal body and chose the home where a wife who would grow old with him year by year was waiting. A wavering human can choose what to be swayed by. Yes, I will put today's lesson in your hands. Before a decision involving big money or people, ask yourself just these three things. 1. Where is each person's stake hanging in this game? Don't try to read the other person's heart. Look at where their stake lies instead. 2. Am I listening to a warning right now, or am I ignoring it? Especially if uncomfortable words have reached you. That is the signal. 3. Is this move a winning shot? Or a desperate move? If there is truly no other path, then it is a winning shot. If you just can't see any other viable path, it's a gamble. Assuming it's not yet your time to make a move. In that case, just quietly fill your granary. Because only those who set aside grain when the wind is favorable can endure the month of headwinds. This movie is currently popular in theaters. If you go see it, keep an eye out for something. Does the sea on the screen look like just a story of sailors from 3,000 years ago, or do you keep seeing your own company, your bank account, and the people around you overlapping it? If you have started to see the wealthy, you are already viewing the world through the eyes of this book. Do you remember? This man's journey home was originally a 1-month trip. The book says it wasn't the sea, but Odysseus himself who turned that journey into 10 years. What follows us and endlessly shakes us is not the storms outside, but the traps we set for ourselves. And above all else, Odysseus was not a man who never stumbled. He stumbled more often and more severely than anyone, yet he was the one who finally made it home. I will end today's video with the words left by the author of this book. The swaying itself is beyond your control. But what we choose to be swayed by remains, in the end, up to us. Thank you. This has been Hua's Mansion. Thank you.